This is the Open Floor NBA podcast where we talk about the league and all the big stories going on in it. Joining me once again for a weekly appearance from FS1, All the Smoke, a monumental sports network, the great Rachel Nichols, who is safe and sound. Rachel, you were telling us before we started recording, Malibu. Wow, what is going on in Malibu right now?
Yeah, you may have seen on television, there's a lot of fire there, Chris, not where it's supposed to be in people's fireplaces. They worked really hard last night. I can't believe these firefighters and what they do here in this area of California with all the wildfires they contain. Where I live is sort of over the hill across the canyon from where the fires were. So we did have our power knocked out. We did have a bunch of evacuation warnings, but no mandates yet in our neighborhood. So here I am coming to you through it, but you can see where the fire was from our place, and they have these helicopters with these big sort of bucket type things, canvas things that go into the ocean, scoop a bunch of water, bring it back over to where the fire it is, and dump it out. It's really impressive and incredible to watch, and I'm very grateful to everyone who worked through the night, because it's natural disasters, man. It's climate change. It's all getting a lot worse. Everybody in the southeast with the hurricanes can attest to that, and it's scary to see.
It's crazy. I was in Maui over the summer and got a good look at the damage that was done there recently. I mean, that area is still trying to dig itself out of a nasty wildfire of its own. It's crazy. I'm glad to hear you're good and your house is good and everything is good with you and yours there.
Yes.
So on this show, it is kind of a quiet period that we've got going on in the NBA as the league tries to focus everybody on these NBA Cup.
You will watch the NBA Cup. Gosh darn it.
You will watch the NBA Cup, or we will make you watch more Knicks Raptors, which is what I was subjected to last night. Watching good Knicks
Bodega
offense.
Cat, baby.
Good Knicks offense, bad Knicks defense, but that's a conversation for another day. But I want to start talking about Denver, which is not part of these NBA Cup games this week. They are now sitting there, Rachel, at 12-10. Seventh place as we record this in the Western Conference. They are there despite what has been a historic statistical season for Nikola Jokic, who is averaging career highs in points. He's shooting 50% from three this year, which is not an insignificant number either. 4.5 threes per game. That's a career best for him as well. The Nuggets offense is pretty good in the top 10, but the defense is pretty bad. They give 126 points in a game against Cleveland, 122 in a loss to Washington, which you really have to try to lose to Washington. Jamal Murray has been bad. The young players have not stepped up. It would be tough to waste another great season like this for Denver. But as we pass the quarter point of the year, is there any saving the Nuggets? What can save the Nuggets at this point?
I mean, I think part of what can save the Nuggets is the whole league really, but the whole West that they're dealing with for playoff seeding. Everyone's kind of dealing with injuries and problems. Yes, they're close to 12th and being the conference and being out of the play-in, but they're also not that far off in the loss column from second or third. So it's just sort of still a bit of a jumble, which gives them the opportunity to get better if they can get their act together in certain places. To me, the key is Jamal Murray, man. I mean, when they won the title, it was because Jamal Murray was absolutely on fire, incredible. And we know in the modern NBA, as amazing as Nikola Jokic is, and we should talk about just how just mind-boggling these numbers have been, you can't win alone. You just cannot win an entire title by yourself. So to have someone like Jamal, who we know is capable of contributing what it would take to get Denver back up to the top, but hasn't been doing it, that to me is really the key. He is sort of a guy who historically has gotten much better in the second half of the season, but I'm not sure, Chris, if he started kind of at this point since they started being as good, and he started being as good as we know him to be. So he's going to have to really, really improve. Do you see that happening?
I don't know. It's been such a bad start for Jamal. And you're right. As great as an individual talent as Jokic is, he can't carry them, not in a conference as deep as the Western Conference. And the on-off minutes for Jokic they've got a little bit better, but they have largely not been good. And Murray's got to be the guy that fills that void, that gives you the real number two option. I mean, looking at some of his numbers, 17.8 points. That's the lowest since his second year in the NBA. He's shooting 42% from the floor, which is down 6 points from last year. He's shooting 33.3% from three. That would be the worst in his career. You have to go back to his rookie season when he shot in the low 30s. He just can't get it going. And you watch it anecdotally, and the burst is kind of gone. Physically, he just looks a little ragged out there. I don't know. Look, he's not an old player by any stretch. I mean, looking it up, what is he, 27 years old, going to be 28 in February. He's still very much in the prime of his career. I don't really get it. Like, he wasn't good for Team Canada this summer. That was another maybe a warning sign for him. But, beyond all the other stuff, like, Jamal Murray has got to play better. Like, he's got to be the guy that is the all-star next to Nikola Jokic.
Yeah, and I mean, I don't know exactly what level of apron are they, Chris? Are they the first apron, I think, right?
Apron, yeah, I want to say, yeah.
So they can make a little bit of changes around the edges, but they can't do anything.
But they're not going to do it like we saw.
But yeah,
I mean, the biggest beyond Murray, like, the mistake started this offseason.
I would argue this mistake started 2 off seasons ago, but sure.
Well, 2 off seasons ago, right? The Bruce Brown deal, like, you couldn't have given him the money. Like, he got $20 million per year from Toronto. Like, it is what it is. Jeff Green, I would have found a way to bring back, but I get it. The KCP stuff, though, is a catastrophe. I mean, KCP, even though he hasn't shot the ball great in Orlando, for years proved that he was a round peg, round hole type of fit with this Nuggets team. Offensively, he stood in the corner, he made threes. Defensively, he guarded multiple positions. Like, he was the right fit between Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. With him gone, they've relied on Christian Brown, who's been okay, and some of these other guys, the young guys, Peyton Watson and others, that have not delivered in the way that KCP used to deliver. And I think the Nuggets, if they can't turn this around, they're going to be haunted by the fact they could have either paid KCP, given him the money that he wanted, or done some kind of sign and trade. Like, there were options available to them last summer. They could have done some deals that would have brought something back in return, but they were, motivated by money here. They didn't want to spend more than they had to on this team. And I think that's ultimately going to cost them. Maybe they believe that, Watson, Brown, others could deliver. Julian Strother could deliver more, but not having that veteran presence, the guy that Michael Malone can rely on, I think that's costing them big time this year.
I think that's the key, because they are getting some of those numbers in other places. If you break it down, it's not numbers-wise as catastrophic as it could be, but in terms of fit, as you say, and sort of presence on the team, that's where the catastrophic element comes in, because so much in the NBA is about fit, right? I mean, 10% of the guys are so exceptional, they'll be great anywhere. 10% of the guys are so terrible, they'll be just on the edge of out of the league anywhere they go. The 80% of the guys in the middle, it is about, are you in the best place on the best team with the guys around you that maximize you? And can you maximize them in a way that creates this fit that becomes more, greater than the sum of its parts? And the Denver Nuggets, to your point, had that with KCP. They had that fit. They had that guy who, from Michael Malone to Jokic to Murray on down, could rely on to do certain things, be a certain kind of guy in the locker room, have that presence. And that's gone now. And it's obviously creating a dent. But I have to go back to, if Jamal Murray can get better, this team will look a lot better, and we will be talking about them differently, because that's how good Nikola Jokic is. He just needs a little bit more, like just a little bit more, guys, because he has been, I mean, look, we went into this season, Chris, being like, I don't know if he can win MVP again, because there's voter fatigue, and there's also like, what category does that put him in, and all the other blah, blah, blah we talk around MVP. But how do you argue with what he is doing to at least not have him near the top of that conversation, if not in the number one slot? I don't even have a word for it. I on social media earlier this week, I said, what do you even call this? Because it's just ridiculous. These numbers and how he's playing and the ease at which he's doing it, just looking at stretches of his where it looks like he's, everybody else is playing with a connection, a wireless connection that's a little janky, and he's just going through smooth sailing 4K, the whole thing. I mean, it's incredible.
But 50% from three is remarkable. It's
nuts.
That's crazy.
Just needs Jamal Murray. And I know that, again, they can make little changes around the edges. As you point out, they probably won't. But unlike some other teams that just doesn't have any options anywhere, this is a team whose best option is on their roster. And obviously, it's not going to make a huge shift defensively, but it will change the dynamics enough because we've seen it over and over again. If Jamal Murray can improve, I think that this team will be in a better position than you might expect. If he can't, and he's just lost whatever he had before, and if so, then you also have to look at that front office that just gave him another huge contract after the Team Canada debacle. Then this team is going to be in problems, in a lot of trouble for a while. And as you say, you're talking about one of the greatest players this league has seen, and we don't know if he's ever going to win another title.
Yeah, and Jokic's MVP case could be an interesting test case if this team continues to like flounder in the bottom of the Western Conference playoff bracket, because it seems more likely than not that he's going to finish this year with the best numbers of any of the MVP candidates that are out there. It's a good field, but I think he's going to wind up with the best numbers. But traditionally, and you know this, voters don't like to vote for guys that don't have team success, with few exceptions. Russell Westbrook was a recent exception when he had that, astonishing year in Oklahoma City, averaging the triple-double. But more often than not, you look at the winners, they're first or second or even third on their on teams that finished in the standings. So I think it will be interesting if they wind up 7, 8, 9, and Jokic is averaging 30 and 13 with 45% from three. It's going to be an interesting case study for voters. So the trade stuff, like when I talk to coaches about what Denver needs and what they could do, in the hypothetical, it always comes down to trading Michael Porter Jr. because most people think they can get enough offense without MPJ, right? Like he's a great offensive player, but most people I've talked to think that this team, when healthy, with Gordon, with Murray, with some of the other guys they have, they can manufacture enough offense. What they need is defensive versatility, and they need depth, right? So if somehow, some way, if there was a team out there that would give you 2 or 3 rotation players in exchange for Michael Porter Jr. Michael Porter would be the best player probably in any deal that you'd make. But if you can get 2 or 3 veterans that Malone could turn to and rely on, and he loves playing veterans.
He loves veterans.
Loves his veterans. But so if you can get 2 or 3 of those guys that fit into this Nuggets system, you can manufacture enough offense with Murray and Jokic and Gordon and those guys that maybe MPJ would be a luxury. And you're better off with 2 or 3 guys at 75% of the level of Porter, rather than just having this one guy capable of giving you 25 and 30 on some nights. What do you think of that? Do you think that they're better off with a few more veterans or keeping Michael Porter Jr. around, who was a huge part of their success a couple of years ago?
Yeah, and look, we're kind of talking about better off in what way? Do I think that will put them, if they can make the kind of deal you're talking about, will that put them more solidly in the top half of the Western Conference? Again, assuming Jamal Murray at least can improve somewhat, which he has a track record of doing throughout a season. Yeah, I absolutely think that will. Will that help them win a championship? I don't know, because you do need those guys like Michael Porter Jr. in a big playoff run. You do need those offensive talents that, frankly, are very hard to find around the league, which is why if they did want to trade him, I think they would get a lot of interest. But the trade rules are a lot more difficult than they used to be, even for a team that isn't a second apron team. All the other teams have their own issues in terms of what they're restricted to be doing. So I think it's going to be hard to find that deal. And then it's a question of what is your long-term goal here? Because if your long-term goal is just get your head above water and be better, not every team can win a title. I think that kind of change that you're talking about could definitely make a difference. If you are letting go of a player that has the ability offensively to sort of catch fire the way we saw him in the playoffs a couple years ago, you need those guys. So it's really, can you get what you're talking about somewhere else without dealing him? And look, I mean, we're going to talk about Memphis in a minute. There are other front offices around the NBA who have been able to do such a good job scouting and being able to find the right players at the right time, who are getting guys in some cases off the street and being able to work them solidly into the rotation. And that's really what Denver needs to be able to be doing this past summer, last summer, I would say, because you're right, they weren't going to re-sign Bruce Brown, but there are other changes you can make. There are other finds you can find. And Denver just hasn't been doing that, frankly. And without that, they're not going to be able to reach another championship. And I just don't know if it's worth giving up Michael Porter Jr. if you can't do those other things around the edges.
You know, a name that piqued my interest that was just reported on as we started talking was Jimmy Butler. And, I don't know the math to it, right? Like I'm not, we're just
the math is rough.
The math is rough. Jimmy's contract, Michael Porter Jr.'s contract, but they're both making a considerable amount of money. if somehow, some way Denver could make that math work, that's a player I think could really help them. His competitiveness, I think would galvanize or maybe would alienate, I don't know, one or the other, some of the younger players on that team. Hard to say sometimes with Jimmy, but I think he's a two-way type of guy, playoff tested, somebody I think that would have a positive effect, a KCP-like effect or better on Jamal Murray. Like I know the reporting now is like the Texas teams, Golden State for Jimmy Butler.
Right.
But if I'm Denver, like even if you don't re-sign Jimmy in the offseason, you at least can get off the Porter Jr. contract and then you can kind of figure things out from there. Like short term, that to me is a guy that makes a lot of sense.
Oh, short term, I think he makes a ton of sense for them. And we know that when he gets to a new team, he really excels, right? He's a quick starter on the teams he's on. No one's worn out their welcome yet. Younger players love to play with him. He brings a toughness. We know in the playoffs just how exceptional he is at just getting you that extra little bit wherever you need to win a playoff game. So short term, yes. But you then, again, have to rely on your ability to, in this summer, if you just lose him, to get the other guys, now that you have that contract and that cap room freed up, that you have to do something productive with it. And again, I haven't seen that from this front office in the past couple of seasons. So I don't know how they can improve there. And I don't know if it's just timing and the right deal hasn't been in the right place. And, I'm not obviously privy to every phone call the Nuggets organization is making. So this isn't a criticism saying I could do better or we all know better, but it hasn't happened. And so again, to make a move like that, you just have to know what's the next step. What's the next step after that? I do think he would help. And obviously, if you've got Jokic, if you've got even a slightly improved Murray, you've got Russell Westbrook, who frankly has been doing a lot better there and helping Jokic score more than anybody expected when he signed there or when he went there over the summer. I think in the short term, it would be phenomenal. And I think they could really make some noise in the West. But then again, what happens this summer? How do you improve from there?
I honestly, if I'm Denver, I don't care. I don't care. Like, I think your window is
now
pretty short, right? Like you got 2, maybe 3, or God knows how long. Jokic has like the body type and the style of play. He could be 40 playing like this. But in playing like an MVP, you're probably looking at 2 or 3 more years of that. Jokic is also the kind of guy that could just say, screw it. I'm going to go back to Serbia and race horses, for the last 30. But he could. Like, I'm just saying, like, he's a little unpredictable. Little unpredictable.
Yes. No, I agree.
If I'm the Nuggets, I don't care. I don't care about the consequences of next summer. Right. I don't care about the contract that Jimmy might want down the line. Like, I got to be thinking short term. Short term, we're not winning. Like, Jamal gets better. I don't think they're on the same level as Oklahoma City. I don't think they're on the same level as some of the other top tier teams, Minnesota in the Western Conference. If you can get a guy that's battle tested like that, I say go for it. Roll the dice. It's almost like the Raptors Kawhi Leonard situation. Be like, you know what?
Right.
We're probably going to lose this guy in the summer. But if we give ourselves a chance to win a championship while we have a championship level team, you got to go out there and kind of do it. That would be my
but they didn't have Jokic on their team, right? In Toronto. So there was much more incentive to just roll the dice and let's see what happens. With this, when you're looking forward to how your team building over the next few years to maximize this unexpected meteor. I mean, it's not like he was drafted expecting to be one of the best players in NBA history. And we're going to be talking about that. Is he top 20? Is he top 15? If he wins another one, another title, another MVP, where are we going with this? No one expected that when Jokic was drafted, but you got him now, and you have got to figure out how to maximize him this season, the next season, the season after that. And if you sort of, throw everything at the second half of the season, maybe it'll work because, again, it worked for Toronto. You're absolutely right. Oklahoma City's had a bunch of injuries. Some of the other younger teams in the West don't quite have the experience yet that we consider them, they're just dominant all the time, no matter what. You see some of the teams like Golden State, obviously making noise, but do they really have the horses, age-wise and everything else to go completely and win yet another title? There's a window there. There's some room there right now. And you know how I feel about Wemby, man. It's only a matter of time. Once he gets to whatever stage he's going to get to, I think it could be the way it was with LeBron James in the East for all those years. It could be the, Victor Wembanyama Invitational in the finals. So I do think the window is now. I'd be nervous about throwing everything at the second half of the season, but maybe you do it. I don't know. You're starting to convince me.
Go big or go home in a situation like this. And look, I'm glad to finally hear Miami acknowledging the inevitable that Jimmy Butler's not going to be part of their team long-term. They had the great run to the finals in 2022. But since then, they've been an average team, paying Jimmy, max money for the next 3 or 4 years. Never made any sense, not for a team that wasn't going anywhere. So, I'd want, if I'm Denver, I'm aggressive on that front
All
and
right,
let the chips kind of fall.
let's
Where
go.
they may. All right, so the Memphis Grizzlies were in Boston this past weekend, getting a big win over the Celtics. Celtics playing on the back end of a back-to-back, but still a good win for Memphis. They've won 9 of their last 10 now. They're sitting at number 2 in the Western Conference. They're top 5 in the league in offensive rating. They're top 5 in defensive rating. Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson are both averaging better than 20 points per game. They've got 6 guys, Rachel, averaging double figures, including Jalen Wells, a second-round pick, and Scottie Pippen Jr., who has become a player with the Grizzlies. You got Jay Huff, Luke Kennard. They're snipers from the perimeter for this team so far. Are you buying the Grizz as a real threat to win the West?
I mean, look, as a real threat to win the West, they could. We didn't expect Dallas to come out and win the West last year. I would say that Dallas is still a real threat to win the West. I would say Oklahoma City is still a real threat to win the West. So I don't know if I'm going to quite put Memphis up there quite yet, but I will say that they have the potential. And one thing that's really impressing me is that this is a team that's been so injured, right, the last few years. I mean, it's been ridiculous if you look at their man games lost to injury, those kinds of stats. And they have made such a concerted effort to play the guys they have at not minimum minutes, but just incredibly low minutes. No one on that team is averaging more than 30. Most of them are 28 or lower. And it's really an approach that kind of circles back to when Ja Morant said, oh, I'm not going to try to dunk anymore. And then, of course, 3 days later, he pulls off one of the most spectacular dunks of the season.
Insane.
But his larger point was, I'm not going to try to dunk anymore in a way to put on a show or stuff it over someone and make my name by, posterizing someone. He's not doing that anymore. And you can see it. As many as he does still that are pretty amazing. He passes up a lot these days. You can kind of see it in his eyes. Where, oh, okay, never mind. Where he does obviously get the score, but in a different way. And that is all part of trying to stay healthier. And with the focus on that, with the fact that they've been able to boost the rotation with other guys that can keep their big guys off the floor for so many minutes and stay more healthy, I think that has been the winning formula there. They have great coaching. And I'm really interested to see what this team can do. They're so fun. Ja Morant is still one of the most fun players in the NBA. And again, this gets back to my Denver conversation. You know how much it cost them to get Scottie Pippen Jr.? Nothing, Chris. It cost them nothing. So it is possible to find these kinds of guys. And when I see front offices sort of saying year after year, the roster's the rosters. This is what we can do. This is what we could find. It's complicated in today's NBA. It is, but there are still contracts out there and players out there to be had. And that's what this team has really done so impressively.
Yeah, Zach Kleiman and that front office has far more hits than misses over the last few years when it comes to these draft picks, these guys they grab off the basketball scrap heap. Remember Jay Huff,
sure.
Every team in the league could have had Jay Huff, and now he's shooting 40+% from 3 for this team. I'm kind of with you on, I'm not so sure about Memphis as a contender. And I sort of like, they're almost like the Cleveland of the West. And I don't say that insultingly, because Cleveland is.
I think you just insulted 2 cities right there.
I don't know, but I'm sort of talking about roster makeup and how they're winning games. Like right now, Memphis is winning games with a lot of unlikely guys stepping up and making big plays. Right, like they're getting it done, both ends of the floor. But some of the cause for concern, chief among them, are the 3-point shooting. And that, to me, was a red flag for Memphis coming into this season and remains a question mark at this point. Right now, they're 17th in the NBA in 3-point shooting percentage. That's with them being off to this fantastic start. You've got Desmond Bane, who I thought would be a more reliable 3-point shooter, shooting 32% from 3. Ja Morant, right around 30% from 3. They're kind of being propped up by guys like Pippen and guys like Jay Huff, who are shooting great from beyond the 3-point line. But I wonder when they get into the playoffs, do they have enough 3-point shooting? Because they're going to have to go up against a lot of teams that are pretty high level 3-point scorers. And how many of these guys that are playing right now are going to be reliable in a postseason series against a battle-tested team, right? We know Morant will be. He's a great player. Jaren Jackson will be. I think Desmond Bane will come around.
Yes.
He's a really good player. But some of the other guys we're looking at off their bench, like Scottie Pippen Jr. is a great story. Can he be a quality backup point guard in playoff games? Jay Huff, kind of same sort of question I have for him. They got Marcus Smart. I think Marcus coming off the bench is great for them. That's
Yes.
another
And
versatile,
finally healthy. That's another guy
yeah,
finally healthy.
finally
I mean,
healthy,
look,
giving them. Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say, it's extremely, you and I have been covering the league for so long. It's almost never can I think of a time where a team hasn't really made it deep in the playoffs and suddenly goes and wins a title or even is in the finals. It takes those steps. We talk about it every year, all the time, right? So do I expect the Memphis Grizzlies to win the NBA title this year? I do not. Do I expect to see them in the finals? I do not expect that. No, I mean, they could possibly, but it's not the thing I expect. Do I expect them to go deeper possibly than this group has ever had? Yes. Do I think that they have the potential, even with the 3-point percentages that you're talking about, to still beat a lot of teams? I was just looking up right now because I wanted to make sure as we spoke, as recording this, it was still true. The Memphis Grizzlies are leading the NBA in points per game. And the whole thing about shooting percentages, hey, the math, 3 is more than 2. Well, 3 is more than 2 in the chase in the goal to get more points than your opponent. If you're accomplishing that, even with your 3-point percentage being in the middle to bottom half of the league, then it's okay. The name of the game is to get the most points. And obviously, when you get to the playoffs, when you get deeper and more competitive situations, that 3-point percentage, those numbers, how they're playing, how their younger players adapt to more challenging coverage, that kind of thing is going to be a factor. But I think it'll be a factor in a real learning and positive playoff experience for them. And that's a step that this team needs to take. And I think they're going to take that step, even if they don't skip a bunch of steps and go all the way.
So they've got Jay Huff at 41% from 3, Luke Kennard at 40% from 3. Those are the two, main rotation guys that are shooting 40% from above. Going down the list, you get down to like kind of more of their core guys. Jaren Jackson, 35%. Scottie Pippen Jr., 33%. Marcus Smart, 32.5%. Desmond Bane, 32%. John Morant, 30%. Brandon Clark, 6.3%. That's not good.
Yeah.
So these numbers
That's just not nice, Chris. You don't got to talk. You don't air him out that way.
It wasn't intentional. I didn't have it written down. Like, let's put it out there. Brandon Clark shooting 6%. It's tough to win in today's NBA like that, where we talk about this all the time, but the 3-point numbers are astronomical. Teams are, Boston, more than half of Boston's shot attempts are from 3-point range.
I know. It's insane.
High 40s for some other teams. It's just tough to win that way. So I think they've got a formula to finish in the top 3 in the regular season. I just need to see it in the postseason before I believe. I need to see these guys that we're talking about, these rotation guys that have been so good for them this year. And like, I'm looking at their minutes played, like you said, everybody under 30, which is incredible. Desmond Bane leads in minutes per game at 28.3. They've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 10 guys at around 20 minutes per game. It's crazy. Then they're playing a whole bunch of guys, a whole bunch of different minutes, but it's a shooter's league now. And I just wonder kind of what's going to be the long-term future of that team if they can't get enough perimeter shooting. All right. Last thing for you, because we always have to talk about the Lakers because it's required here on the podcast. But the Lakers continue to give us reason to talk about them. And just like last week, it's not good. Lakers have lost 7 of their last 10 games. They get absolutely gashed in Miami last week in a game they just didn't show up for. The 3 wins during this 10-game stretch, Rachel, are against San Antonio, Utah, and Portland. They got lucky against Utah. Portland stinks. Fine. Win over the Spurs. Whatever. I'm not even sure what the question is at this point, but it's like, what is going on with the Lakers? Like, we're starting to hear some of these calls for major change. Our friend Bill Plaschke with the LA Times firing off the trade LeBron and trade AD column, getting that started before trade season actually kicks in on December 15th. But Plaschke had that one ready to go, and he wants them gone. He noted in his column that, and I didn't see this at the time, but Robert Horry, who is now an analyst for the Lakers TV, effectively said they were playing like a team trying to get its coach fired, which is not analysis that you want to see from your home broadcast. So what do you make of the Lakers? Like, are we getting close to seeing a team that might be waving the white flag on the season? Is there any chance we see a substantive move made involving one of its stars? What do you think?
Look, Bill Plaschke, one of the legends of the journalism business, one of the most decorated columnists in newspaper history, I think, and he's been at the LA Times for so long. He's not slow to call for these kinds of things. We have seen many Bill Plaschke columns saying, tear it all up, blow it all up. It's not a shock that we're seeing that this early, saying, get LeBron and AD out of here. I think the way he phrased it is LeBron's got to ask out for a trade because, as we know, LeBron has a no trade clause. I'm not going to get into all the complexities of why all of that is impossible, getting rid of AD and LeBron. The Lakers are a second apron team. They've got to be able to make trades like that one for one. You can't, combine other salaries. They've got to be an exact salary match. It's not happening. And by the way, it's also not happening because we know the way Jeannie Buss runs that team. She runs that team where stars like LeBron and AD have a home on that team forever. She is never going to deal them. Her father did the exact same thing. Kobe Bryant went on the radio and publicly asked for a trade. And they were like, the Buss family was like, yeah, no, we're not going to do that. So they're certainly not going to tear it up themselves. And you also have to think about what's the goal. Look, nobody wants to be this bad. LeBron doesn't want to be this bad. AD has called this depressing. The franchise in general is getting pummeled here in LA from their fans. But still, the goal in LA is to have a team that people are interested in watch. And as long as LeBron James, certainly, and even Anthony Davis is here, that is going to happen. So I don't see any universe where those two guys remain. I think the larger questions they have to ask are kind of what we were just talking about Denver, which is this is a team that since it won a title has not been able to make the roster moves that we would hope for. And yes, they reached the conference finals, but then were blown out. And then the next season got blown out in the first round and then playing. I mean, they're not going in the direction that you would want to go. And I don't think you can keep blaming the coach. I don't. And I don't know, I don't know if Rob
proven, right? Like, it's not Frank Vogel's fault as much as it wasn't Darvin Ham's fault, and it's not entirely JJ Redick's fault. So,
I mean, if you're Pop Pelinka, do you think, and I honestly don't know, has he been changing coaches with this frequency? Because, I mean, I would never have fired Frank Vogel. And I thought Darvin Ham, well, he clearly lost the locker room. So that becomes a more complicated situation. It's not like it was his fault that they were losing the way they were losing. I mean, is this sort of been a bit of a dance to cover up some of the roster problems that do fall in on the front office's doorstep?
Well, it's them doing the easiest thing, right? Like, the easiest thing to do to shake things up is to fire the coach. But Frank Vogel was fired, 2 years after winning a championship? Darvin Ham was fired less than a year after he took the team to a conference finals. Everybody was singing Kumbaya at training camp next year. So these moves are being made quickly. And Redick, look, we've got, I've gone back and forth on Redick a lot on this show. I do think it's problematic when your team no-shows as often as the Lakers have no-showed in some of these games. That second half that they played against Denver at home, where they just didn't even come out of the locker room at the third quarter, got the doors blown off by a Nuggets team that was playing without Aaron Gordon that game. And then that Miami game was a debacle from start to finish. Like, that was embarrassing to play that way against Miami, to get lit up by a Miami team that is not that great offensively. So, I mean, when that kind of stuff happens and you're not even a quarter of the way through the season, I do think a coach has to take some accountability for that. But even if JJ Redick was the combination of Phil Jackson meets Red Auerbach meets whoever, you're not going to win with the roster as flawed as the one that the Lakers have. They're not good defensively. Like, AD is a great defensive player. The rest of that team is average or below average. It's kind of what it is. Like, I mean, everyone wants to talk about Austin Reeves being a great defender. He's fine. He's fine. He's good, whatever. But the rest, D'Angelo Russell, below level, below par. Jared Vanderbilt eventually coming back, if that happens, is not going to save this team. He is not going to turn them into a top 10 defense. I just don't know what they can do. I think, one of the things that Plaschke wrote that's dead on is, like, this team is headed for the exact same type of finish they had last year, which is a spot in that play-in field. And if they get in, they're going to get the doors blown off them in the first round.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree with that. They are a second apron team, right? I feel like I had that in my notes, but
it's difficult for them to make deals. Yeah. But it's difficult for everybody because you've got to.
I apologize if I'm getting the apron wrong. I can't believe I'm saying that out loud on a
we're not apron experts,
NBA podcast. I'm not aproning right. I may be aproning right. I may be aproning fabulously, Chris. You don't know, but neither do I. But the bottom line, it is very hard for them to make trades, and Anthony Davis and LeBron James are not going anywhere. But this is, again, a time where they've had a couple summers now in a row to make improvements around the margins. And what we keep hearing from the Lakers front office is, like, hey, we've been trying. There's no deals there. And we do hear about trade offers they've made. It's not like, if you listen to the underground trade buzz, they haven't been involved, but it hasn't worked. And we just talked about Memphis. On other teams, it has worked. Look what Golden State has been able to do with some of the players that they've brought in. And we talked about the 2 timelines for a couple of years and all of that stuff. But again, it's working. So I just am curious in this last season or two of LeBron's tenure, what else this team can do. I don't think they can fire JJ. I really don't. The way they came into this season introducing him, saying they made a big point of saying, we are changing coaches, and changing coaches has been an issue here. We recognize that. We are interested not just in winning a title this season. We are interested in building a franchise. You hire a never before head coach, you have to allow for the fact that there's going to be at least a year learning curve and maybe a little bit longer. I do wonder, Chris, you're around a lot of those JJ Redick press conferences, as am I. He's very honest. And in the media, we love that about JJ. And frankly, I don't think he could not be, because everyone knows him and his personality so well. When he's bullshitting, everybody, it's on his face everywhere, because he's such a truthful guy. However, saying in press conference after press conference, this team doesn't give any effort, criticizing some of the players, if not explicitly by name, certainly by action. I don't know if that wears off or not. Michael Malone has done the same thing for years, and obviously that team responds well to it. I don't know. Do you think that that is part of some of the lackluster energy and effort we've seen? Is that some of these guys just feel like, the coach is telling us how awful we are. The fans are telling us how awful we are. I don't feel it. It's not a good vibe in the locker room, whatever.
I don't know. They had that kind of positive post-game reinforcement under Frank Vogel and Darvin Ham, and didn't really seem to respond to that either.
I agree.
I don't know. And look, whether it's Michael Malone, Ime Udoka does this a lot. I saw that in Boston.
Absolutely.
There, just kicking the crap out of guys publicly.
Mm-hmm. Does it in Houston.
I think there's, it does in Houston with those young guys, and they're certainly responding. I do think there is value to that, and there's an accountability to that. The learning curve stuff. I don't know, how much more of a learning curve does this team need? Most of the roster's been together forever.
Not the team, the coach. Years. I'm just saying, in terms of who you're going to blame next. I don't think the Lakers can fall back on what they've done most of the last 4 years, which is blame the coach. I just don't think that that's a viable option.
I agree with that. And look, they if you believe what they were saying at the start of the year when they hired JJ, which was, we're trying to build out a program here. Something that's going to exist beyond LeBron James. They're invested in him over the long term, presumably past this LeBron James era. What they haven't done, though, is supply him with the kind of players that make sense for his style. JJ came in and correctly said, we got to shoot more threes.
Yep.
Didn't really go out and get him more 3-point shooters. Just said the current group of players has to shoot more
Draft
threes.
Pick was good.
We add Gabe Vincent back into the mix, and, Dalton Connect is we're going to draft him, fine. But the rest of those guys, it's just reshuffling chairs from last season. They want to get better defensively, more accountability, but you didn't really change much there either. Dalton Connect is a good shooter, but he's a low-level defensive player at this point. So there's no way to get better in that regard. And some people forget last year, LeBron and AD had the 2 healthiest years they've had in years, right? AD was as healthy as he's been since his New Orleans days, and LeBron played a huge chunk of the season. So it wasn't like one of those 2 guys was missing, and they come back and add some value to that. I don't know where they go. As long as they, and I think you're right. Jeannie Buss and that ownership group will keep this team together because they like stars in LA. But I don't know what that's going to get you. That's going to get you right back here every single year. You can keep changing the coaches. You can keep adding a rookie or 2. But there's nothing that's going to change with this team. It just doesn't matter how much cosmetic stuff you do.
Yeah, no, look, I think exactly that. We both said it. Jeannie Buss is not going to trade away LeBron James. LeBron James is not going to ask for a trade, guys. That's not happening either. So I think they will
he's not.
Finish. Yes, he will finish his time with the LA Lakers. When that finish is, though, is one of the things I think is sort of now up more for discussion. He's played individually so incredibly for so long, even at times this season. Triple doubles, he's been, you just kind of can't fathom it at 40 years old. However, this is a grown-ass man who does not want to come to work every day and be miserable. And he has said he does not want to be one of those guys hanging around the league for too long, not quite good enough, not on a team that's quite good enough, just sort of a road show. Let's come see LeBron in his last season or 2. So when he had been playing so well, there was a question of not just playing this season so he could play with Bronny, but would he try to hang on another couple seasons so he could play with Bryce? And it's not just the media that speculated that. Savannah James talked about that on Instagram and on her podcast. So, I mean, it's something that has been in the air. I don't see, having covered LeBron literally since high school, I don't see him hanging around just to hang around on a team that isn't going anywhere time after time, when he is going through stretches like we saw him go through where he couldn't hit a three and he wasn't able to contribute and he barely got that 10 points for that record he keeps holding. I don't see that continuing for years. So to me, the question is LeBron James going to ask for a trade? No, of course he's not. Is he possibly going to retire after this season when it certainly didn't look like it at the start of the season? It's in play. It's certainly in play. And that obviously would be a huge roster shakeup and money and cap freedom and everything for them. Would that enable and empower AD to be more of the true leader of this team? Is he ever going to be able to step up to what he's capable of, A, at all, or B, in LeBron's shadow? So that decision about what happens to the Lakers might be made for them by LeBron. And I'm just very interested to see what he decides, because he clearly could stay in the league for another 2 years. I mean, we both know it. It's just a matter of, is he going to want to if the team continues to be like this?
So I think LeBron is going to announce his retirement before the start of his final season. I think LeBron's going to get his farewell tour, and I think he kind of wants it. And I think it's to be.
Oh, I think he wants it.
To be feted as one of the greats of all time. That's when he said, what was it, a couple of years ago after that series lost to Denver, he dangled this retirement idea. I'm like, come on.
Yeah, I get it. And by the way, he wants, he's like, I don't want the rocking chair tour. I think he wants the rocking chair tour. But I will say, as much as I think he wants that, I think if the rest of this season goes as poorly as it has been for the last couple of weeks, and it probably won't. The NBA goes up and down, teams go up and down. I'm sure they will hit a better streak at some point. But if a big chunk of this season goes the way it has been going recently, if they can't ever get their act together, if they finish out of the play-in or maybe barely in the play-in and then lose their first play-in game, there may be, as much as he wants the rocking chair tour, there may be a thought in his mind of, I'm not sure I'm willing to endure another season of embarrassment just to have people like cheer me for my career. I mean, this guy is going to cheer for his career the whole rest of his life.
Does he go to management though? Like, I think the big question is for me,
goes to ownership.
Well, ownership, yeah. Does he go to? But does he say? But does he? My thing is, does he say, "Look, we're not winning here. We've tried. I'd like to compete for a championship one more time. Let's work together and try to get something done." Like, that's my question. Like, does LeBron have it in him to play for one more team before his career is over? Does he have another championship chase with Golden State? Or, I remember a few years ago, Denver kind of made a run at him. Like when the Lakers were struggling, they were thinking about, trying to go get him. Does he have that in him? I think is the question. Or is it like LA and then I'm done? Like that to me is unknown.
I think he's been criticized enough by enough of sort of the greats for team hopping in the first place. And by the way, I look at that as more impressive that he's won with all these teams and is the only one to have won with all of these teams or tied a record or whatever he did. But I don't think he wants to be going to a place where he's riding like Denver, where he's now the number 2 to Jokic and riding his coattails in his city. I think there was some intrigue with that Golden State Warriors sort of question mark earlier this, over the summer. Obviously, he and Steph had a grand old time playing together in the Olympics. I think sort of the being so close to LA where he could just hop up and down because his family sure isn't moving. I think the idea of him and Steph teaming up together and they would really need him as opposed to him just going somewhere where he could be a coattail rider. I think all of that had some intrigue. But even that, he didn't go for, right? I mean, the Lakers checked with him. He has no trade clause and didn't get anywhere further than Golden State inquiring. So if that didn't happen at a time where, by the way, still over the summer, it was easier for teams to deal those kinds of salaries, to make up the kinds of things they would have need to do to get that trade done, and for him to feel like he was going into a situation where he was helping or an equal partner as opposed to just joining someone else's team. If that didn't happen, I just don't see him, saying, one last run, let's go somewhere else. It's not like, we've seen guys do that, but those are guys who have never won a title. And nobody begrudges them. I mean, you saw it in Boston with hockey, like, Ray Bourque, after so long and just not working out, goes to Colorado, and nobody in Boston begrudged him for that, right? Everyone was like, go win your title, man, you've earned it. That's not the sentiment that LeBron would be facing, right? He's earned plenty of titles. He would only be criticized. And frankly, I don't know if he wants to. I don't know if he wants to start again. Get tired at 40, man.
That is a phenomenal 90s Ray Bourque reference right there.
Thank you.
Ray Bork getting dealt to Colorado, winning his championship. And yes, we, the people of Boston, were happy for him doing that. I do think it's if there's a trade, it is probably Golden State or bust. The Lakers, I just checked, they're a first apron team. Remember when LeBron signed that contract?
First
a little
apron.
bit less money. Took a little bit less money to come like 45 grand under.
That's right.
That
Yeah. See, the people are finding out in real time, just like us.
By the way, if you search
too many aprons, Chris. There's so many.
If you search
aprons.
Lakers apron on Google, you get Lakers aprons.
Aprons.
First, you have to go to the news.
A
section.
Christmas gift for everyone.
You find that. I could theoretically, I could see a Golden State situation, whether it's this trade deadline or next summer, kind of unfolding because of the Steph relationship, because of the Draymond relationship. They're all kind of at that exact same point in their career where they've got a couple of years left, really at most. I could see that materializing, but other than that, it's Lakers or it's retirement for LeBron James. But we'll see what happens. Rachel, I will promise to not put the Lakers on the rundown for next week. We're going to take a Lakers.
Don't make promises you can't keep, Chris Mannix.
Unless they trade LeBron, we will not talk about the Lakers next week. But I appreciate
the
it.
NBA Cup coming up, and the Lakers aren't
NBA
involved
Cup,
in that.
are you going to Vegas?
I will be in Las Vegas. Will you be there?
I will be there on Monday before the championship game. So I'll miss
maybe we can do this live.
Yes, we should do this live. Excellent.
There
See,
you go.
we're workshopping a production meeting in real time.
Real time.
Good stuff, Rachel. Always appreciate it.
Thanks so much, Chris. See you guys later.